Good morning. Welcome. Happy Friday morning. We made it to the end of the week. And what a wonderful way to celebrate the end of the week. My name is Dan Hurley. I'm the Executive Director of University Relations here at Vancouver Island University, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all today to the first in three of this year's Arts and Humanities Colloquium. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're on the traditional territory of the Sinimuk First Nation, and we have a wonderful relationship and partnership with them. I also want to acknowledge some important people, of course, who make this event happen. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Ross McKay, Dean of Arts and Humanities. Ross, are you here? All right, Ross. I can see you coming in. There he is up there. Good. Thank you very much, Ross, and thank you very much to your office for all your support for this event. To Dr. Timothy Lewis, Chair of the Arts and Humanities Colloquium Committee. So thank you, Dr. Lewis, for your wonderful support. I also want to thank the staff here at the Malaspina Theatre for hosting this colloquium series, this and the other two that will come this year. To the Media Research Lab for filming right here, there, this series. I also want to thank all of you. What a great turnout today by our faculty, staff, and students. Wonderful participation in this. And I also want to thank all the various community members out there who come to these events every year and who've come here today. So thank you to you as well. I'm very pleased to introduce the first of three colloquiums in this important Arts and Humanities series. Before our presenters introduce this morning, I'd like to acknowledge again all of the faculty and staff and the Arts and Humanities faculty here at this university. You're an important and key part of our institution, as you have been for our 40-plus year history delivering these programs to our students. Through the efforts of dedicated faculty and staff and the growth of a dedicated audience, we're celebrating the 5th anniversary of the Colloquium series this year, and it's a good time to reflect back on its beginnings. So 5 years ago when this series began, it was started by the English department, and they originally developed a colloquium series where faculty would present their research to one another. Those involved found the presentation so engaging and so thought-provoking that they decided to pursue how they could broaden it to the broader arts and humanities faculty, and to share it not only with faculty, but also with students, staff, and the wider community. And so with the approval of the faculty, the Arts and Humanities Colloquium series was born with broader participation for those putting their valuable time into organizing and promoting this free lecture. The first colloquium drew an audience of about a dozen in a boardroom, just not too far from here. Now we get more than 100, and I think that we're easily over 100 here today, with, of course, many, many dozens and hundreds of other people from the community who come and participate in this series. It has become a community of shared interests for all involved. It has become a community of friends of arts and humanities who enjoy learning and sharing about the wide variety of topics presented each season. The growth of the series is a testament to presenters who are eager to share insights and research into the arts and humanities that they are conducting here at VIU. And sharing this research with our university community and the community members who take the time to join us is very rewarding. It's an opportunity to showcase the work of our faculty in a broad variety of disciplines, research that makes an important contribution to not only scholarship in these disciplines, but to the lives of people who live in this community, on Vancouver Island, in our region, and for Canadians as a whole. You know, it was the poet William B. Yeats who famously wrote that education is not about filling a pail, but education is about lighting a fire. To me, this statement helps to define what liberal arts and humanities education is all about. An education that is rooted in the study of modern languages, literature, philosophy, visual and performing arts, not only brings perspective and understanding to our world, but also helps to enlighten our souls. As an arts graduate myself, majoring in Canadian Studies at the University of Winnipeg, I know my education helped me gain a deeper understanding and appreciation of the diversity and complexity of this great country. It helped me shape my perspective on public policy issues, challenged me to think critically, and to challenge others and my own assumptions, while also helping to form my values. And it is these values that have helped me to guide me through all the years that have followed. For the value of a university education is not simply about how to make a living, but how to live a life. At this university, we understand that we must prepare our students for the workforce and the economy. But equally important, we know we must prepare our students to contribute to society as engaged, informed, and active citizens. And indeed, we all hope to light a fire with all of our students. And that is why Arts and Humanities and the speaker series in particular is so important. So we hope that you will look forward to the next 2 dates in this series. On February 14th, we'll hear from Professor Doug Stetter from the Department of Media Studies and Digital Media Technology, and he will share his presentation on how several million Chinese are using social media to support, question, and challenge their government, making for one of the most important political movements on the planet today. I know a number of you in the audience would be very interested in being part of that session on February 14th. So that's Valentine's Day, so make a date of it. Then on March 28th, we will conclude the series with a special extended colloquium to help celebrate our 5th anniversary. The topic again will be technology, but this time we'll be exploring fascinating technologies, future directions in the arts and humanities. So I hope you'll join us for a fascinating examination of technology in the arts and humanities with faculty and students sharing their experience and observations on the role of technology in their disciplines. And of course today, I'm very much looking forward to Sasha's presentation and to see the connection between the birdsong and the Baroque era. So we hope to entice you on March 28th to stay with us, not only for the presentations, but there's also a catered luncheon. If that's not enough to entice you, then I don't know what is. So thank you very much for joining us today for this first colloquium, and we hope to see you throughout the series. At this time, it's my pleasure to welcome Greg Bush to the podium to come forward and introduce our guest speaker today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dan. Well, it's my pleasure to be here today. I was quite flattered when I was invited to do this, and I knew a little bit about the topic in terms of one bird, two notes. And as a jazz musician, I thought, well, maybe Sasha's going to talk about Charlie Parker, because, of course, Charlie Parker's nickname was the Bird. And then I thought, jazz musicians, we play show tunes, so I thought maybe it'll be about Bye Bye Birdie, or we'll play Bye Bye Blackbird, or heaven forbid, Yellow Bird. But none of that. Of course, I am teasing because Sasha will be talking about one bird and two notes, and as Dan said, Baroque music, and also a little bit about Debussy as well. And earlier I was teasing Sasha, and I said, well, Debussy got all of this stuff from jazz musicians, but of course it was the other way around. It was the jazz musicians who were interested in Debussy. Sasha and I go back to 2007 when we both started here at the music department at VIU. And since then, we've we've been good friends, and I've hung out with Sasha and her husband, and we've had numerous conversations about different kinds of music. And particularly when Sasha would start talking about classical music, I was all ears, because I usually walked away from the conversation enlightened about something to do with classical music that I didn't know before. She brings today a wealth of experience, having come to Canada from Croatia, where she was trained there in classical music and played pop music. I think you told me you played in a band. And played piano and studied theory and was involved with radio in Croatia, and then eventually came to Canada, where she was involved with a radio production with the CBC, doing all sorts of shows and recordings and things. And of course, when she mentioned that she recorded a few jazz concerts, I was like, which ones did you record? You know, a couple of them were my heroes, of course, so I was quite impressed with that. And eventually finding her way to Vancouver Island, I think from Regina and Winnipeg and Toronto and Vancouver, and along the way picking up a master's degree in music, and now pursuing a PhD in music at University of Victoria. So I know that Sasha's going to have lots of really cool things to share with us this morning. She let me know that she's not going to ask anybody to sing, so I'm glad to hear that. But I would like to turn the podium over to Sasha Koerbler.
French composer Claude Debussy is not renowned for his interest in birdsong. Although he found inspiration in nature and in the poetry of symbolism, there is not a single title among his many compositions that features a name of a bird. However, I believe that I spotted a birdsong fragment in his settings of a poem entitled Un Sourdine by Paul Verlaine, which has led into further research still in pursuit. The mentioned birdsong fragment has inspired me to revisit the so-called word painting technique, to also delve into birdsong in music, and to continue to explore the issue of meaning in music, some of which I will try to show here today. Debussy composed two versions of Un Sourdine. This title is most often translated as muted or quiet in the twilight. The first version dates from 1882, when he was 20 years old, and the second from 10 years later. Although settings of the same poem, the two versions differ in the choice of key, in length, and to a large degree in their musical content. Here I mean the soprano line in particular and the piano accompaniment. However, there are some similarities between them as well, particularly in the area of meter and rhythm. The 1882 version opens with a syncopated chord in the piano accompaniment, so this is right here, followed by an eighth note triplet, which is then followed by another syncopation, again at the end of this kind of two-measure fragment. The soprano enters at the restatement of this two-measure basic idea with a melody that features pitches of the opening piano chord. So in the piano chord, we have pitches that are F sharp, D, B, and so on, G sharp, and so on, lower, all the way to E. And soprano opens with an arpeggiation of that same chord, F sharp, D, B, and so on. But before I move on, let's perhaps hear this example. As the song unfolds, the same syncopated gesture supports the soprano for the first few lines of the text, but after that it is heard again at the very end, following the soprano's closing lyrics. The 1892 version opens somewhat differently. The syncopated idea enters independently, in other words, not on the first beat and not together with the left hand. Its triplet, it's shorter as well, infusing this opening gesture with a bit more character. The soprano entry is more subdued in that example. Its starting pitch is much lower than in the 1882 version, but the rhythm of its opening line is directly related to the piano accompaniment in that it imitates its opening syncopation. Like in the 1882 version, the closing measures bring back this characteristic fragment with an even shorter triplet. This shorter triplet is shown right here. course, the imminent question is, what does this gesture represent? Why is it there? And to get an answer, of course, it's absolutely necessary to look at the text of the poem. So the poem is fairly long. What you're seeing here is only the last of the 5 stanzas, and in a translation, not my own, the poem reads something like this. Quiet in the twilight, offered by these lofty branches, let us allow our love to be imbued with this deep silence. Let our souls, our hearts, our enraptured senses dissolve into the languid motion of the pines and strawberry trees. Close your eyes a little, cross your arms on your breast, and chase away all plans from your sleepy heart forever. Let us be lulled by the soft and soothing breeze that brushes across your feet the rippling russet grass. And when evening falls gravely from the oaks, like the voice of our despair, the nightingale will sing. I think we can all agree that the poem portrays a quiet moment between the 2 lovers that, due to the nightfall, has to come to an end. And it is the nightingale that signals this change. The Nightingale song is considered among the most sophisticated and beautiful bird songs. Experts tell us that a nightingale usually has a very large repertoire of over 200 different phrases, but it is a fixed repertoire, and each phrase is identical every time it is produced. Apparently, a bird tends to cycle through its repertoire, missing some phrases, which is why it seems that one always hears a different phrase. The call of the nightingale that composers have aimed to represent in their music is this one here. So it features a repetition of a pitch, which many composers rhythmically interpret and notate as syncopation. As it turns out, such is the case with Debussy too. And it is only in the last few measures of the second version of Answurdin, so after the lyrics, Le Rossignol chantera, that this became apparent to me. Going back then to the first version of the song, one can understand Debussy's attempt to introduce and underline the opening of Verlaine's poem with the mentioned syncopation. The nightingale call heralds imminent light nightfall, signifying to the listener the time of the day. The technique that Debussy uses here is called word painting, and it is a technique that has been used by composers to reflect, often pictorially, the literal or figurative meaning of the text. Early attempts have been traced in the music of Guillaume de Machaut, a French medieval composer, whose Mass de Notre Dame features certain type of emphasis at the occurrence of specific words. For instance, the note values of Ex Maria Virgine, which is right here, Ex Maria Virgine, in the credo movement of the Mass, are lengthened substantially in comparison to other note values in that movement. This expressive device makes these words stand out of the otherwise very, very busy polyphonic context. So we can see here that we have much shorter values approaching some sort of an ending. Ex Maria Virgine occurs here with notes of double the length than the ones here. It lasts for a while. And then the music content sort of moves back to its usual busy polyphonic context. Word painting, the point of this, the meaning of this is that, first of all, Maria Virgine had to be emphasized. The 4 singers are singing in what we call in music in homorhythmic texture. So there is no polyphony, there is no imitation, there are no rounds. Nothing like that played here, which makes the music really stop. The congregation gets to understand the lyrics, and then they move on. Word painting flourished during the Renaissance period, and many composers thrived in inventing different ways of portraying the text. It was a technique often used in madrigals, which is why it is also referred to as madrigalism. An example of that we're about to hear is by English Renaissance composer Thomas Wilkes. And as the music unfolds, I would like you to listen carefully to word painting that occurs on words that are marked in red. You will notice that the word hill is set with the highest note in the phrase. Descending uses descending scales and leaps. Ascending uses ascending scales. And running down the hill uses quickly descending passages in imitative polyphony. I'm sure that you'll be able to figure out the rest. So I hope that you noticed that the words 2 by 2 were sung by only 2 voices of the group of 6 that is performing this piece. These are the king singers. 3 by 3 was performed by 3 voices, together by all 6, and all along by the top voice alone. Also in the phrase long, live fair Oriana, the low voice begins with longa, which is a name for a very, very long, very lengthy note value, and continues with long sustained notes. Another excellent example of word painting can be found in a work by French Renaissance composer Clément Jonquin. It is believed that he wrote this composition to celebrate the victory of the French over the Swiss at the Battle of Marignan in 1515. The most stunning part is the onomatopoeic depiction of a battle that he skillfully incorporated into his song. So we're starting somewhere around here, around the middle. In terms of word painting or bird song, or what I dare to term as bird painting, don't spread it around, Jean Quin's output also includes a stellar example of onomatopoeic portrayal of the bird song. Here is a middle section of Le Chant des Oiseaux, the song of the birds, and I will try my best to follow the score so that you can see how it is notated. And so on. I hope that you could see how much repetition of the same pitch Jean Quin uses in his portrayal of a lively bird song. But also there are what we could call special effects, such as tr, cr, fr, and so on, all aiming to portray the chirping part of the bird song that is otherwise really unsingable. The examples shown so far are all in the domain of strictly vocal music. However, these techniques had a major influence on composers of instrumental music. In addition, one of the important publications of the mid-17th century was the book called Musturgia Universalis by Athanasius Kircher, who was a German scholar and polymath who published around 40 major works in the fields of Oriental study, geology, and medicine. And in Musturgia, he expressed his own views on music. He also provided for plans for constructing water-powered automatic organs and presented diagrams of musical instruments and so on. But most importantly, he provided music notation of birdsong. So we can see in this image that is taken from his book that the song of some birds is transcribed by using a single repetitive pitch, such as the partridge that is right here, or the little chicks over there. Some bird song is transcribed in two notes, such as that of the cuckoo. And it's not clear whether this is a major, what we call in music, or a minor third, but cuckoos can do both, and composers have used both versions in their compositions. And the hen also has two pitches there, so a lower one and a leap up to a higher note. And then there's this rooster, whose call is transcribed with a single repetitive pitch, followed by a slurred drop in intonation, which is what roosters do. Notated here by a symbol that is also actually used in some 20th century music. So this, along with the onomatopoeic techniques used in vocal music, definitely influenced the writings of composers of instrumental genres. Good examples are nested in the music of the French Baroque composer Jean-Philippe Rameau. A short movement entitled La Poule, or the hen, is from one of his keyboard suites, and it depicts the hen's pecking and its characteristic call by repeating a single pitch and adding a little bit of an ornamental flourish instead of that second higher pitch we saw in Koerbler's notation. So here's the repetitive, and here's this bit of a flourish. This gesture was later picked up by composers that wrote instrumental music in the 19th century. But one of them that actually took this very fragment from Rameau is Italian composer, 20th century Italian composer Ottorino Respighi. He orchestrated this bit in his composition entitled The Birds, and he dedicated this movement to Rameau and his compositions. So here we can see that the portrayal is perhaps even closer to the actual bird call because string instruments have the ability to slur the pitch, something that a keyboard instrument cannot do. Depicting the hen was also of interest to the 19th century French composer Camille Saint-Saëns in his probably most popular composition, The Carnival of the Animals. Here, the piano fragments are imitated by a violin. So here we have this repetitiveness again with a bit of a dissonant ending, dissonant decor at the very end. Modest Mussorgsky, a 19th century Russian composer, also chose to portray chicks in their shells in his composition Pictures at an Exhibition. We will notice some similarities again, but the instruments used here are woodwind instruments. But let's leave the hens and get back to the more generic portrayal of the birdsong. Jean-Philippe Rameau also composed a short keyboard piece entitled Le Rappel des Oiseaux, which is translated as The Bird's Recall. And in it, you will hear his keyboard transformation of that chirp part of the birdsong, the element that Jean Can portrayed with the onomatopoeic sounds of tr, kr, and fr. And here's how this same fragment sounds on today's piano. So if performed well, you can tell that this shape here, or a trill as some would refer to it, sounds even more convincing on today's piano because it benefits from the softer touch of hammers on the strings in comparison to that of quills on the strings of harpsichord. But the point is that the composers accepted the shape, or this trill, as a representation of the chirp, which then spread throughout the music literature, and not only or necessarily to represent the birdsong, but also to show off the performer's virtuosity. One of the compositions that does both, portray the birds and demand virtuosic performance, is Antonio Vivaldi's The Four Seasons. This work is considered to be the first in the so-called programmatic genre, because Vivaldi provided a narrative, a story, to describe to his audience what was happening in the music. So, for instance, in the opening concerto, entitled Spring, Vivaldi writes, "Spring has returned. All is gay, and the birds sing happily. Fountains play in the breeze, constantly moving. The skies are then dark, lightning flashes and thunder roars. After the storm, the birds return with their song." All of the concerti in the four seasons, the spring, the summer, the autumn, and the winter, are written for violin and the string ensemble, and the demands on the performer become apparent soon after the opening few measures of the spring with the entry of the birdsong. The repetition of a single pitch embellished by shakes and trills can be found all over the instrumental repertoire. Not every shake and trill is there to imply the birdsong, but even when it doesn't, in other words, when the composer has not expressed such intent, the audience still tends to interpret such fragments as birdsong. This is how, for instance, one of Joseph Haydn's string quartets got its name, The Bird. Beethoven's Symphony No. 6, also known as the Pastoral Symphony, is one of his few works containing explicitly programmatic content. Beethoven was a lover of nature and spent a lot of time on walks in the country. He frequently left Vienna to spend some time in rural locations, and he said that about the symphony, the symphony is more the expression of feeling than painting, word painting then. And the title of the first movement, Awakening of Cheerful Feelings, certainly underlines this point. The movement ends with a short section depicting specific birds. Beethoven identified them in the score as the nightingale, right here, performed by the flute. The quail, right here, performed by the oboe, and then a cuckoo, signaled by the clarinet. Suggested in an article by Sylvia Bowden, a professor of piano at the University of Southampton in England, that there is another bird in this movement whose identification is still under debate, and that this bird might have been a blackbird. Here's the fragment that she is referring to. This fragment reoccurs in the body of this movement. The common blackbird is widespread throughout Europe. And as a songster, it is unsurpassed. Experts tell us that blackbirds have a varied repertoire with a rich tone quality, and they continue to learn new songs throughout their lives. Adult male blackbirds can have a base repertoire of 40 motives, which may develop into a similar number of variants, demonstrating rhythmic symmetry and balanced melodic line. Among the blackbird motifs that I have heard from recordings in the past few months or in nature over the years, there's a motif that occurs frequently. So let's hear it again. pitches that I was going to show in the overtone series that are very common in particularly classical style of this kind of music. So we have this pitch here. Right? Then the next one is very similar. It's just that there is a flourish, kind of a chirping type sound after that. The third one has a different rhythm to it, but the pitches are the same. Do, so, mi, do, so, mi. The opening motive in all three of these examples, that are, by the way, taken from three different blackbirds, shows that they can certainly sing a broken chord, but its pitches are not presented in the ascending order as in Beethoven's Sixth Symphony. A version of the motive that we are hearing here, so I'll play it again, the last one. So, mi, do, so, mi, opens, for instance, the final movement of Gustav Mahler's Symphony No. 4. This is a movement that portrays a sunny, naive vision of heaven as seen by a child who also describes the feast being prepared by all the saints. The child, eventually as the movement unfolds, is voiced by a soprano, accompanied of course by the orchestra. The previously mentioned article of Sylvia Bowden also suggests that Beethoven's Fifth Symphony might have been inspired by the song of the Yellowhammer, and I really kind of chose to speak to this a little bit because it's even featured on Wikipedia. If you look at Wikipedia's entry on Beethoven's Fifth, it actually mentions this article, so I thought I would tell you briefly what is there, and then you can decide what you think about that. So here's the well-known opening motive of the Beethoven's Fifth. It is important to notice that the motive starts after a short rest. Therefore, it is not conceived as da-da-da-da. It's conceived after the rest. It's written after the rest. Da-da-da-da. Right? So here it is again. And here's the call of the Yellowhammer. There's a stutter-type sound followed by a higher pitch and then a lower pitch. So let's hear it again. But not all Yellowhammer calls are identical. Some omit the last lower pitch. So with that in mind, here's the call again, followed by Beethoven's famous motive and its transposed restatement. When in close proximity and large numbers, Yellowhammers respond to each other's calls, creating imitations. When compared to a type of imitative technique that Beethoven used here in this movement to develop the next 64 measures of this body of music, one can somewhat see Bowden's point, however vaguely. So here in this next fragment, I have mixed together a group of Yellowhammers, which I found on YouTube because I just didn't have another one. A group of Yellowhammers that are imitating each other, and over top of that, I'm playing part of Beethoven's Fifth, where the imitational kind of structure is there. So here we go. So to support her idea, Bowden speaks to the fact that Beethoven, the ultimate architect, known for his skill of developing large musical content from really nothing, minuscule motives, would have not necessarily copied the Yellowhammer Call, but modified it to something that he wanted to work with. The imitative technique that he uses to develop this short motive further is certainly similar to types of imitative call and response songs that birds create. But let's go back to Beethoven's Sixth and look at his portrayal of the nightingale song. So it comes very close to the nightingale calls heard earlier, particularly the first one, which was this one here. It has been shown that Debussy's nightingale fragment captures the same syncopated element followed by a triplet rather than a trill. But there are more samples of the nightingale song depiction as we come to the end of the 19th and approach the 20th century. Gustav Mahler incorporated a nightingale song into the finale of his Symphony No. 2, which is also known as the Resurrection Symphony. In it, the nightingale song is performed by the flute, and its opening notes signal the beginning of the Epiphany, the moment of revelation. So this goes on for a little while longer. Mahler's portrayal of the nightingale, played in a slow tempo and using some flexibility in rhythm, does seem to be capturing the same syncopation, but as the syncopation itself is actually not notated in the score, it must be our preconditioning that makes us hear it that way. The trill, followed by a brief flourish of very short notes, here, makes Mahler's portrayal distinctly different from his predecessors. 20th century Russian composer Igor Stravinsky created his own depiction of the nightingale song, which we can find in the symphonic poem entitled Le Chant du Rossignol. The work is an adaptation of his opera The Nightingale, whose libretto is based on Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale with the same name. So we can hear that the melody assimilates the erratic element of the nightingale song. A long note is followed by a sudden outburst of shorter values. But in many other aspects, it presents a departure from the syncopated pattern we've gotten used to hearing, and the sense of tonal center is lost. However, Stravinsky's atonal depiction, atonal meaning out of tonal center, away from specific key or tonality that we can easily locate by ear, comes closer to resembling the actual, not quite in tune quality of the nightingale song. A further departure from the syncopated rhythmic gesture can be heard in Olivier Messiaen's portrayal of the nightingale. Messiaen was really fascinated by birdsong. He spent a lot of time looking for birds in their natural environment, recording and notating by ear, had perfect pitch, notating by ear their songs. In the mid-50s, he wrote a collection of compositions entitled The Catalogue of Birds, in which each piece carries a title of a bird and portrays its song. The ninth of 13 of these movements, entitled La Buscarle, or in translation, Chetty's warbler named after Francesco Ceti, who is an ornithologist. Also features the Nightingale song, but in quite a sophisticated way. So completely atonal and fully dissonant, which is very much in Messiaen's style, the fragments certainly attain the variety of the Nightingale song. I've shown here just a really short snippet of what is in this 10-minute long movement. So we don't have quite the 200 different motives that Nightingale inhabits in its repertoire, but we definitely have more in Messiaen's representation than we have heard in the repertoire presented today. To end this selected chronology of birdsong, I would like you to hear the probably most well-known but a fairly recent work by the Finnish composer Eino Juhani Rautavaara. It is entitled Cantus Arcticus, but it is also known as Concerto for Birds and Orchestra. It is composed for a recorded tape, so this is new, recorded tape of birdsong joined by the orchestra. The birdsong was recorded near the Arctic Circle and on the bogs of Limninka, which is a municipality in northern Finland. It is in 3 movements, which had nothing to do with Nightingale. And the last movement features a tape recording of migrating swans, the sound, for instance, that I have never heard before. So the snippet that we'll hear starts with migrating swans, and then the string section rises in a growing crescendo underneath this sound, and the woodwind section of instruments starts to imitate the swan calls, bringing on an overall increase in intensity and volume. Eventually, the seemingly dissonant setting gets harmonically underpinned by the strings in a lower register, opening up the entire vast landscape of orchestral color. This fragment is about 2 minutes long, and I certainly hope that despite of the hiss, you will be able to hear them. So the moment the lower strings enter, we can actually tell that this is a tonal piece of music, and the dissonance that is above it is virtually copied from the swans flying above. A very successful rendering of the migrating swans, I would say, the openness of the vast panorama around them and the emotions that such an experience evokes in the composer. So the question to be answered is, what is the meaning of all this? Why do composers continually choose to portray birdsong in their work? And what does this portrayal accomplish? Does it imply any deeper meaning? As we rummage through centuries of music, certain trajectories of development become apparent. It was in the vocal genres that composers started to imitate birdsong, and the success of their techniques spilled over into instrumental music genres. These genres, the instrumental genres, were mostly programmatic. In other words, there was some sort of a narrative attached to the music, bringing the meaning of certain music gestures closer to the listener. However, as these gestures started to turn into stereotypes, the listeners attached nicknames to compositions of absolute music genres that featured such stereotypes, such as the bird, to Haydn's String Quartet, Opus 33, number 3. Whether these gestures represent certain codes or not, one can never be too sure. And I guess as I continue to investigate the occurrences of Debussy's Nightingale fragment in his other works, perhaps I will be able to confirm this notion. So just to show you kind of what I'm after, there's this, what I identified as the Nightingale call, the syncopation followed by the triplet, followed by a series of syncopations that I'm looking for in other pieces. And so far, I have managed to track it down in his other work called Harmonie du Soir, so that would be something like Harmony of the Evening. And it's right here. It occurs again on a sort of a number of different pages. It's also in his work, a symphonic poem called The Spring. And I'm checking the nocturnes, orchestral nocturnes right now to see whether it's there or not. But one thing is whether it's there, and the other is what does it actually represent as a gesture. In terms of the meaning, a number of observations could be put forward. In the music of Jean, the goal is an onomatopoeic representation of birdsong. In Rameau, we find a similar goal, but accomplished on the keyboard. In Vivaldi, again, we find a similar goal with a narrative, with a story. Vivaldi also added tone painting to his bird painting because he applies an emotional state to his hearing, his experiencing of the birdsong. The piece basically this is only accomplished in a concerto genre because the Four Seasons is a concerto for violin and string ensemble, and it's also the first example of program music. In Mozart, this is a little bit complicated, and in the end I had to take Mozart out with the magic flute, Papageno and Papagena, and so on, because it was too long, and in the end I kind of figured that that's perhaps the opera that you might know the best. But in Mozart, the meaning started to emerge as an indication of the class. And this is not part of my research, this is somebody else's work. So what we're talking about, let's kind of try and put it into things that we have worked with here. If we were to compare the standard representation of a hen call to that of a nightingale, we would notice that although both feature repetition of the initial pitch, the call of the hen follows the beat. Ta-ta-ta-ta-tam, ta-ta-ta-ta-tam, right? It's right on the beat, while that of the nightingale is in syncopation, goes against the beat. So consequently, as the latter technique represents a degree of sophistication in the musical language, the call of the nightingale rises to a higher class of birdsong than that of the hen. In other words, specifically music features classify bird calls based on rhythmic structure, on the number of pitches, on variation, and inventiveness in phrasing. This is confirmed, for example, by Mozart's portrayal of Papageno in the opera Magic Flute. Papageno is a bird catcher and is to be taken as simple folk. As a result, Mozart provides the role with melodic lines that feature repetitions of the same pitch and mostly not in a syncopated rhythm. So this would refer to Papageno singing, for instance, that aria where he repeats, it's called patter, where he repeats the syllable pa, 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 and then Papageno responds with her sort of line, and then sort of between the two we get this patter with a lot of pa, 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 Papageno, pa, 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 Papagena, and so on and so on. The same is the case with Leporello, Don Giovanni's servant in Mozart's opera, who represents a lower class of the society in there as well. So the simpler the folk in the plot of the opera, the simpler the elements of the rhythmic and melodic line that Mozart creates for the role. In Beethoven, the meaning of the birdsong is basically to portray a pastoral setting. In Debussy, I'm wondering whether it signals the nightfall or even something more than that, the separation of lovers at a certain time of the day because it's time to go and perhaps do something else. Anyway, in Mahler, we noticed that the blackbird represents perhaps the sound of heaven to him, and the nightingale is tied to the Epiphany because it basically starts that section of the movement that we listen to. Messiaen portrays birds in their own habitat, reveals the sound of the hidden crevices in different parts of France. And in Raul Tavares, Migrating Swans, we hear not just the swans, but we hear the landscape of his country, its sounds, events, even seasonal events such as the migration. But as the whooper swan, this is the whooper swan that the recording portrays, as the whooper swan is also the national bird of Finland. It's on the back of one of Finnish coins. Its presence also gives a national connotation to Raul Tavares' concerto. By portraying the sound of birds in compositions, composers reveal part of their environment to us because the birdsong they're aiming to imitate or express places them into a certain area, onto a specific continent. There are no loons or wild geese in the music in Europe that I have heard so far. With that in mind, the usage of birdsong does not only position them and their music geographically, but in certain cases it also pronounces their national identity. Thank you.